Yeah. So the book itself it's meant to be, again, a framework. It's not a book that's meant to tell people how to parent. It's to give you a framework. And if you look at the basic content, we call them pillars because pillars are foundational. They're the support that holds the roof up. If you look at a lot of the ancient ruins that are left in Greece and Rome and all these places, the ruins that have fallen, if you notice, a lot of them, the pillars are what's still standing. Even though the roof has collapsed and everything else, the pillars are still standing. And that's why I called them pillars, is because it's the foundation that you need to structure your framework of your family around. Having a set of core values, communication, being consistent. And even the first chapter, especially where a family is concerned, doesn't necessarily overlap into a corporate business type model, but it's talking about unconditional love. What is unconditional love where your family is concerned, and what does that look like? But the rest of it is actually very business success principle related. It's the same thing that they teach at business seminars, but I took it and just applied it to my family. Having a set of core values. Do we have goals as a family? And so, the idea for the study guide came about where I wanted to develop a coaching series for parents and teens, and whether it be going in and having conferences at churches or having scheduled things one-on-one, for like a 10-week program type deal, to have the study guide to actually go through, break down the concepts of the book, and then start really defining and allowing people to pinpoint the areas that needed to be worked on within their own family framework. So that was the idea behind the study guide that went with it. My original idea with the study guide is to allow me to be able to be a part of that process and walk them through that journey.
Okay, everyone, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. I have someone on here today who really likes to talk to Dave Campbell's. And I find that interesting. Our guest today has been on another podcast, which is really, really amazing, by the way. And I love listening to it. And the host over there is named Dave Campbell. My name is Dave Campbell. So my guest today is collecting Dave Campbell's. It's a great little hobby to be on podcast. Dr. Davis McAlister is with me, and we're going to be talking about all things writing. We're going to talk about an amazing backstory that he has gone through and lived through, and we're going to just talk all things about authorship and great things ahead. Thank you so much for making time to be on my podcast, and welcome to another Dave Campbell podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
It's amazing. Yeah, and so the other Dave Campbell podcast is around football, I believe, right?
Yeah, so I live down here in Texas, and we have there's an organization called Dave Campbell's Texas Football. And they publish a magazine. All the high schoolers look for it every year to see if their name has been put in as a high schooler to be highlighted for every school district in the state of Texas. And they also focus on the colleges that are in the state of Texas as well. So yeah, they have their own podcast and media platform and everything. So I was invited to go on there and talk about sports stuff. So
nice. And again, any host with the name Dave Campbell, you caught my attention. So I'm going to see, this is very meta. I think I'm going to reach out to him and see if I can get him on one of my podcasts just to talk to another Dave Campbell. That would be quite surreal for me. So, no, it's really great. So thank you again for making time to be on the podcast.
Thank you.
Can you share a little bit more about your side of the world? What keeps you down there in Texas? Why do you love that part of the world?
I originally moved to Texas after my first bachelor's degree. I moved to Texas to get my doctorate degree. And of course, I met a Texas girl while I was in school, and we got married, and she says, "I'm never leaving Texas." I said, "Well, I guess I'm never leaving Texas either." So but no, I love it here. I work, part of my time, I work with a university training interns that are going through their last year of clinicals. And currently I'm writing some curriculum development and training programs for interns. And I also coach high school powerlifting I have a girls powerlifting team that I coach locally, and I have 27 girls on my team this year. And we are in our last week of our regular season, and all 27 of my girls have qualified for regionals, which is actually very difficult to do. You have to be in the top 12 in your weight class in the region. And there's 28 schools in our region, and so I have 27 girls that have all finished in the top 12 in each of their respective weight classes. So I'm expecting about half of those to make it to state. So, so I do that, and then I speak. I do public speaking. I've got local engagements that I've been doing and have some more scheduled out. Of course, I like writing books, as to why you invited me on here. I've got the one book with the study guide out, and then I'm actually working on another one right now. So, so I don't sit very long and try very hard to keep myself occupied productively. So.
It's amazing. Okay, so the one thing we talked about earlier was a little bit about your background and your story, which I find fascinating, where you've come from and now where you are today. You have served your country. You have now gone on and got your education and moved through, and it's inspiring to follow along and get a sense of where you've come from and what you've turned your life into and how you're helping people. And I would love to if we can, just got to go back a little bit, because there's a time in your life when things weren't the way they are now. And can you take us back to those earlier days before you went to serve your country?
Yeah, absolutely. So, being a 80s kid, I was considered a latchkey kid. I had a younger sister, and I was responsible for keeping up with her. My parents worked long hours, and they actually worked pretty far away from where we actually lived. So I was kind of, on my own from a very early age. And, out of that, you develop a sense of resiliency and resourcefulness and those types of things. And then when I became a teenager, that lack of relationship that I had with my parents started basically coming to a head, and ultimately culminated in me being kicked out of the house. And so I spent a couple months literally living on the streets, fending for myself and, just sleeping wherever I could land. And sometimes it was on a pile of pallets behind a grocery store or underneath the bleachers of a, football stadium, or just wherever I could find. Occasionally I'd be able to crash at a friend's house, but that didn't happen too often. Out of that, my escape out of that was joining the military. Found an Army recruiter, said, "How soon can you get me out?" And they were able to get me out within 2 weeks, which is actually extraordinary, because usually there's a couple month wait once you sign your paperwork to actually get in. But, that was a period of my life that, after about the first month of being homeless, I had reached a point where I didn't, there was times that I didn't want to wake up the next day. I just hoped that I didn't wake up the next day so I didn't have to keep enduring that. I mean, think about it from the perspective of a teenager. Yeah. You don't know what you don't know. You don't have any resources. You don't know anybody or anything. And all you have is just what you have on your back, and that's it. And so I finally got past that, mentally, and just decided, you know what? I said, I'm not going to let this keep me down. I'm not going to let it beat me. I'm going to keep moving forward. And ended up, in the Army, and, they said, we'll pay you, we'll provide you a place to stay, give you food to eat, clothing, everything else, just do what we need you to do. And I was like, that's better than what I got right now. So let's go. I signed the paperwork. Oh. But, so that's how I ended up in the Army. I wish that my intent of going in had been under more honorable conditions, strong desire to serve my country, that type of thing. That's not how I ended up. But I will say that I did proudly serve for 8 years, and I'm very proud of the service that I did and the work that I did while I was in, and everything that I got out of it and everything that I learned from it is what set me on the path to where I am now. So
looking back, being homeless as a teenager, and now coaching and working with students. Do you see the power that you have as an adult in a student's life and encouraging them and motivating them based on where you've come from? Can you imagine any of these students you work with sleeping on a set of pallets after coming to work with you? Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's and unfortunately, I've got one teenager that is on my powerlifting team right now that is going through the exact same thing.
Wow.
And I was proactive and contacted the school administration. She was able to find a family that was willing to take her in for the time being, and so she has a place to stay. She has, she gets to eat regularly and do all those things, and her parents have kicked her out and told her not to come back, and she's a junior in high school. So she's even younger than I was when it happened to me. So, and so, I've been able to reach out to her and help her along the way, and had some really, really good talks with her to keep her motivated and encouraged, and giving her some options and some plans for the future. So,
yeah, the power of a coach in your life, and especially at that age, you're learning so much about yourself and who you are and where your path is going to take you, and to have an adult come around and give you the tools and the support to find out who you are in life. That's would things have been different for you as you had a coach like yourself back then?
I think it would have been. That was the thing, is that I didn't have that mentor. I didn't have that person to reach out and give me the hand that I thought I needed. But at the same time, I still believe everything happens for a reason. Everything has a purpose behind it. And I think given the different circumstances, obviously if things had been different, if I had had somebody else that would have kind of taken me on, and I don't know that I would have gone on the path that I did. And it was the path that I needed. So sometimes what we need is not necessarily what we want, but that's the way I look at it and the way I view it. So
I always wonder when someone goes through a big thing like you have in your life, and wonder, if somebody could erase that part of your life and just take that out of the equation, would you let them do it? Or do you find that shaped you, like you just mentioned, and kind of set you on a course? Like, could you remove the pain and you'd be okay? Or would you rather just leave it and learn from it? It sounds like you learn from the things you live through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not something I would wish on anybody else. And I like the way that you phrased it, shape, because there's a lot of people that allow things like that to end up defining them. And you find a lot of people that when they have some sort of event like that in their life, that's where they get stuck, and they mentally, psychologically never move past it. I work with a lot of veterans, and with veterans, a lot of them are still stuck mentally and psychologically in those events that they underwent when they were, the traumas that they experienced when they were in the military, and they're still stuck there. That was the pinnacle of their life, and they have not moved on to anything else other than that. They have not found a new sense of purpose. And so that's the thing that I think is most important, is making sure that when somebody does have some sort of traumatic event or some sort of high level difficulty in their life, that they find a new purpose, and they understand that is meant to shape them and help, mold them to a certain degree, but it should not define them and who they are.
And then combining that with sharing your story, because your story is so unique that no one else has your story, no one has my story, and we have a different perspective on life that we can share with the world and maybe help somebody that is going through something similar or something that relates to them in a certain way. And by us just sharing that, we can kind of help shape a life. So I love, again, going back to the coaching side, I love that we can be, in a sense, coaches, all of us, with just what we've lived, right?
Yep. That's the beauty of it, is being able to, I can't tell you how many kids I've come across over the years. I've been a coach for 16 years now. And I've lost count of the number of kids that I've seen that have been in similar situations like what I've went through, or other different types of difficulties that they've had to overcome. And I do feel blessed in the aspect that I was able to be intersected with them. I was able to impart into them. And if nothing else, be able to at least give some encouragement that this is not the stopping point. This is just a place that you're at right now, and you're going to move on from this place, and be able to offer that level of encouragement. Some of them have been open to, advice for options, and kind of fire them up to get them the determination that they're going to move on past it.
So let's talk a little bit about your author journey. What sparked you to say that you wanted to become an author? You wanted to capture your thoughts and record them in this way. What was that moment for you that you kind of woke up or had the thought, I'm gonna become an author and share my words with the world?
That I guess that specific thought didn't occur until a good amount of time after the contents of the book, this first book that I wrote. It started off just kind of as a journaling for me. I was trying to remember, I had a high school students that would come to me and ask me for advice. They had problems at home, personal issues, those types of things. And I just found myself in a position to be able to be a mentor to these kids. And they would come to me for advice. And it was one of those things it kind of blew my hair back when I had hair at the time, as the questions that I was being asked. And it made me question myself as a parent. It made me, question, who are my kids talking to? What kind of questions are they asking? And what kind of answers are they getting? And so I started writing these stories down from these kids that would come and talk to me, and kind of journaling them. And then when it just started kind of taking the shape of a book, whether it was intentional or not. And then I said, I could turn this into a story. And started the process of taking all these stories and kind of channeling it through a main character and then also putting in their explanations as to, the reasons that I gave for the explanation that I did, the explanation that I actually gave, to, the advice that I would give. And that way I could go back and look at it. And then my wife and I would sit down and talk about it. And we're like, let's actually look at what the framework is here that we're talking about, we're putting together, because there were some consistencies across each of these kids as far as their home situations and their family lives and all these things. And let's break down each one of these and actually start, kind of analyzing it and seeing what are we missing in our own lives. And so we took 10 years. So I started channeling, logging all these conversations, and then put a pause on it. And then we spent 10 years actually putting all these principles into practice with our own kids. Because in my mind, if you're going to have credibility, you got to have credibility from the fact that you've actually done it. There's a lot of people that will put out things based on theory and advice, and they've never actually done anything that they're talking about. And I didn't want to be that person. I believe that credibility is important. So we actually put these things into practice. And then about a year and a half ago, got a very clear message that it was time to finish what I started and actually put it into a book form. And within, by the time I got that message, within 10 days, I had the book finished. And then I spent the process of trying to learn, all the different aspects of how to publish, and, trying to figure out what the ins and outs of all that were. And that took me a few months to get that all hashed out. So,
because we see things offered online all the time, write a book in 10 days and be rich and famous. And, it's like, 10 days, compared to 10 years of letting that brew, thinking about it, living it, dreaming about it. That's, I don't know. I always kind of think of someone's first book as the book that took you a lifetime to write, because you haven't written anything before. And it's kind of like for me in music, I love a band when they come out with their first album because they've never had an album before. And every song is from the last X number of years that the band has been working together. And then every album after then, it's kind of like, maybe sometimes they get better, but sometimes they don't. But that first song or that first album is always like, wow, this is so spectacular. I see it in authorship too, where, that first book, people might think, wow, who am I? Who am I to share my thoughts with the world and all of that? But that's taken a whole lifetime of living and lived experiences to come to and write. And just the depth. I love an author's first book. It really kind of sets the stage for me to follow their journey as they continue writing. So was it hard for you to actually collect your thoughts and get this into a book form?
As far as the actual sitting down and the content of the book, it actually wasn't. It was just one of those things when I would sit down and I would put that time aside to sit down and write. It's like it would just keep coming, and I had a harder time stopping once I got going than actually trying to come up with things to write about. Which, from what I've understood from other authors, that's a terrible problem to have. Is you sit down and you start writing, and it just keeps coming. And so I just, there's times that I would stay up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning writing. And then I would take it and shuffle things around and edit and reword things and, all those different things as I went. And, my goal is not to make the book too long. I know that, I like to read, but, I know the majority of people with how busy everybody's lives are and everything else these days, it's better to keep a book that's a little bit more concise. So I was trying to find that balance between a good book that was easy to read versus, not skimping on content as well. So, that's the thing I think was probably the hardest, was going through and doing the edits. And once I had everything kind of written, all my thoughts written out, and then organizing it so that it had a good flow to it. Yeah.
And I guess we can equate it back to powerlifting in the sense that becoming an author and writing you're using a new muscle that you've never used before.
Yeah.
Right? So you're going to develop it, strengthen it. Mm-hmm. And then like for me, if I went and looked at what your students are lifting, I would be like, there's no way I'm picking that up. I can't. That's what you're the size of you can pick up that much weight. There's no way. I couldn't do that. And I look at authors and go, there's no way I could write a book. Like, look at how much work that is. There's no way. I can't do that. But as you develop your muscle, as in writing, right, and you just keep coming at it and you learn from a great coach who teaches you how to lift properly so you don't hurt yourself and how to be effective in your lifting, you get a coach for your authorship, and somebody can kind of guide you and help you. Did you have anyone in your past that kind of gave you some pointers and suggestions on how to be an author?
Not until after I was already done. Okay. Kind of had everything. I had a couple people go through and just read it, kind of proof it, give me some input and advice. People that I knew that had written books before and had been successful at it, have them go through and look at it. And, they talked to me about some formatting issues and wording, address some of the wording that I had in there because I did grow up in the South and in the U.S. And so, our English is not exactly the most stellar. People think you look intelligent clear up until you start talking with a Southern accent. So, it was after I had pretty much had everything written down. Then it was a matter of going through and reorganizing. I had somebody that, and actually the guy that wrote the foreword for my book was very instrumental in helping me with a lot of that. So
nice. Can we talk about the book then? It was Pillars of Powerful Parenting, right? And so can you explain to me the power of the study guide that goes along with it? How do these kind of two things work together?
Yeah. So the book itself it's meant to be, again, a framework. It's not a book that's meant to tell people how to parent. It's to give you a framework. And if you look at the basic content. We call them pillars because pillars are foundational. They're the support that holds the roof up. If you look at a lot of the ancient ruins that are left in Greece and Rome and all these places, the ruins that have fallen, if you notice, a lot of them, the pillars are what's still standing. Even though the roof has collapsed and everything else, the pillars are still standing. And that's why I called them pillars, is because it's the foundation that you need to structure your framework of your family around. Having a set of core values, communication, being consistent. And even the first chapter, especially where a family is concerned, it doesn't necessarily overlap into, a corporate business type model, but it's talking about unconditional love. What is unconditional love where your family is concerned? And what does that look like? But the rest of it is actually very business success principle related. It's the same thing that they teach at business seminars. But I took it and just applied it to my family. Having a set of core values. Do we have goals as a family? And so, the idea for the study guide came about where I wanted to develop a coaching series for parents and teens, and whether it be going in and having conferences at churches or having scheduled things one-on-one, for like a 10-week program type deal, to have the study guide to actually go through, break down the concepts of the book, and then start really defining and allowing people to pinpoint the areas that needed to be worked on within their own family framework. So that was the idea behind the study guide that went with it. My original idea with the study guide is to allow me to be able to be a part of that process and walk them through that journey. So,
can you take us back to chapter 1? Can you unpack a little bit around unconditional love? Because I can tell that means something for you personally. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So get a little bit of background as to why that chapter came about. So in the issues that I had with my own family growing up, I had a much closer relationship with my mom than I did my dad. But, even after my time in the military, I tried to work to try to mend some of those fences where they were concerned. And everything was decent. It was kind of a loose bond that was able to, kind of be restructured. And then when my wife and I met, she had 2 boys from a previous marriage. And that seemed to be fine, clear up until we had, my wife got pregnant on our honeymoon with our twins. And when the twins came along, they wanted to treat the twins differently than they wanted to treat the older ones. And that became a problem. Had some, different conflicts that went back and forth, and ultimately culminated in an email that I got from my parents that I actually still have the email. Even though it's in an old Hotmail account, I've kept the email, and every once in a while I pull it up and read it, intentionally. And the thing that stood out most in that email was that I was told that I had exceeded my number of transgressions that they would allow, and that I was cut off.
Wow.
And that made me stop and think, what, as a parent, when did you decide that there was going to be a finite number of transgressions that you would allow a child to be able to have? And really the thing that they were considering a transgression wasn't a transgression. It was about their feelings. And, the fact that I, had challenged them on, look, we're not treating the kids differently. And they didn't like that conversation. And they made a choice that they wanted to cut ties. So, but, I looked at it from a spiritual standpoint. I looked at it from, because not to get too far off into, the weeds with the, the spiritual side, but, we do structure our framework around a Christian principled household and framework. And I looked at it from the standpoint of, with the way God looks at us, that's unconditional love. And that's what we should be structuring and raising our family around. And I broke it down to 7 principles that unconditional love is about. And we go over that actually pretty extensively in the study guide. I touch on it a little bit in the actual book, but the study guide hits it a little bit harder. But, I just can't imagine where my kids are concerned. My kids have done things that I don't agree with. I have 5 children. All of them are adults except for the youngest. She's a sophomore in high school. And while my children have done things that I don't necessarily agree with, and they know that I haven't agreed with it, but I haven't allowed it to destroy the relationship. I have never told my children, because you did that, I'm never talking to you again. And, the concept that you would put conditions on loving your children. Yeah. That's not credits that are to be earned. If you think about children, when they come into the world, they love their parents, even the children of, young children of parents that their parents have abused them. They still love their parents, and it's unconditional. Yeah. And that's what our model should be. Children come into the world loving their parents unconditionally. It's the parents that put conditions on it. Yeah. And that's what I hope to get people's attention with in that is that, don't put conditions on your children. Your children are going to screw up. They're going to make mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes. I did things that I look back on when I was in my late teens, early 20s, even things that I said that I look back and I'm like, why did I say something so stupid? Or why did I do that? That was stupid. But that's part of the learning and growth process of going through life. We're going to do and say stupid things, along the way. And that shouldn't be a defining moment between you and your children as to whether you're going to have a relationship with them or not. Outside of, somebody murdering, another member of the family, I could see some issues there, but, that's talking in extremes. But as a general day-to-day relationship with your kids, that shouldn't even be a conversation. So that's what that first chapter really hits on and touches on. I wanted I put that one intentionally first because I felt like that was the first thing that needs to be addressed. And most of the time when you address that issue, a lot of the other issues that we address throughout the book, they tend to resolve a little bit easier. If you just get the framework of what unconditional love should be in a household.
I love that you're starting with that with chapter 1. I'm resonating with you too. I have 3 kids that are out of the house now, and some of the kids have taken paths that I had never wanted for them, but that was their choice as adults. And you see them struggle with the results of their decisions, and you're like, oh, I just want to jump in. But at the same time, they'll reach out and they'll be that, hey, Dad, I love you, or hey, Mom, I love you. And, you can, to cut them off, for me, is really never an option, despite disappointments, albeit, but I just can't imagine typing up that email. I don't know how, and I don't want to put anything on your parents, but I just don't imagine myself ever typing that email. I don't know if I could send that. So,
yeah. That relationship did not go the way I wanted it to go. I had hoped that it would have been better. I wanted my parents to be involved in my kids' lives and in our lives. And that was a conscious decision that they made on their part not to. And that relationship ended up coming, I tried several times to call over those years and to just try to engage in a conversation, talk about the issues, and let's work through the issues. And I would just get hung up on. And then, a number of years, 8 years went by, and I found out like sixth hand that my mother had passed away. She had a heart attack in her sleep and passed away, and nobody had called me. And a member of our family found out by accident, because apparently my dad didn't want anybody in the family to know about it. And so he tried to keep it quiet. And it just so happened that there was the nursing home that originally was going to handle my mother's remains and everything else as far as the burial back in Mississippi. He had contacted that funeral home, and somebody in the funeral home knew another member of my family, called them, said, "Hey, I just got this name." And then, of course, that spread like wildfire, but I ended up being, about the sixth or seventh person that was called and contacted and told my mother had passed away. And then I found out that when he found out that family knew about it, he canceled all those funeral arrangements and managed to just set something up privately down in South Texas where they lived. And again, tried to keep anybody from finding out about it. I tried to go down and go to the funeral home. I was told that I was not allowed to see to see her. And then, so I ended up having to call my dad. I called my dad and I said, what is going on? And that conversation did not go well. There was a lot of things that came out, not only just about that situation. There was a lot of lifelong issues that came out in the course of that conversation. And that conversation ended with my dad telling me if I showed up to the funeral, he would have me arrested, or escorted out. And then he said, "I never want to hear from you again. Don't ever call me. Don't ever come near me. Don't come, never again. I don't want to ever hear from you again." I was like, okay, it's your wishes. Yeah. And so, that was the end of it. And that was 12 years ago. So
you just,
so
as a parent,
I don't want,
as a parent, you just can't. I would look at my kids and be like, I can't. I would never want our relationship, no matter if I'm not doing something right or if they're not doing something right. I would never want that conversation to happen. So I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that, because there's people listening to this that are like, I know exactly what he's saying. I know exactly how he feels. I've had that conversation. I've had that email come through, and to see that you're treating your family with love and respect and care. Again, it's that coaching side of you is coming out even as a parent. So I love that.
Yeah. Well, it's all part of a generational curse. And that was something I learned about much later in life is generational curses. And essentially, my dad was treating me the way his dad treated him. And, his father pushed everybody away, divorced my grandmother, pushed everybody away, became a recluse. Didn't want anything to do with anybody. And then, whether it's conscious or unconscious, my dad has done the exact same thing. He's done, even to his own mother, my grandmother. I ended up taking care of my grandmother. And she lived 7 hours away from me. And I finally had to, she had a medical issue, and hospital called me and said she can't go back to her home and live by herself. So I had to drive from Texas to Mississippi, which is about 7.5 hours away, go get her, collect up all of her things, handle all the stuff where her house was concerned and her car and all that stuff, and then move her back to Texas so that I could take care of her. And she was with us for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years before she passed away. So if nothing else, I was at least able to make sure that the last couple of years that she knew that she was around people that loved her and cared about her. Yeah. And the thing that upset me the most, though, with that whole deal was that I had to make decisions where her health was concerned, and even to the extent of her last, I had to make the decision to take her off of life support, and she finally succumbed to, dementia and Alzheimer's, and I had to make the decision to shut everything off. And at the time, I was angry about it because that wasn't my decision to have to make. There should have been some siblings, that were in charge of making those decisions, not me. Yeah. And of course, I got over it and just said, you know what? I'm thankful that if anybody had to make the decision, I flipped it and said, I'm glad that I was able to be the one to do it, because, my wife and I spent, she was kind of in her last throes, and it took about 3 days. We just stayed in that hospital room with her because her one wish was that she didn't die alone. And so we stayed in that hospital room for 3 days with her until she finally passed. And so, just so that she wouldn't be alone and fulfill those wishes. And so I hope that by doing that, my children saw that process, and I hope that they took away from that's how you take care of your family. That's how you treat your family. My goal has been to break that generational curse and not have those same things happen within my own family, even to the extent, we've got, out of our 5 children, we've got our oldest. Our oldest, unfortunately, has made a decision not to talk to us. And it had to do with somebody that he married. Her goal was to get him away from his family, and she did. We've tried our best to try to contact him, mend those fences, even to the degree where she's on the phone. She has to be on speakerphone when we talk to him. And if somebody says something that she doesn't like, she hangs the phone up. And unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about that, as much as we've tried. But thus far, all of our other children, it's gone great. It hasn't been because we told them we never want anything to do with you again.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing. So what I love is just the fact that now when we come to read Pillars of Powerful Parenting and we get to chapter 1, this insight about why chapter 1 is there. And I don't know if a lot of readers understand the importance of how a book is structured and why chapter 1 is chapter 1, and the importance of that as an author saying, start here, because this will shape everything. Just hearing your heart and kind of unpacking this for us, I think anyone that picks up your book and starts in chapter 1 and reads those first few words are now going to be like, I understand why this chapter is so important. And for a shameless plug for our podcast, you can live the next chapter from that point on. There you go. But that chapter is so foundational to kind of build the entire book around. I love how you've unpacked that for us. That is amazing.
Thank you.
So you've gone on now. You're working on another project too, right?
Yep. So what I've done is I'm working on another book. Right now, the working title is The P's of Success. And it's going through and unpacking all of the basic principles that I have worked on and developed and have embraced to contribute to success, whatever success means for that individual. Some people, they dictate success based on the amount of money that they have or the amount of education they have or whatever that is defined for you. But, for me, it's about the elements of it. And there were 7 elements that kind of in a progression, and I'm putting them in the same thing, the intentional order of progression of the things that you need to look at, finding a purpose. And I actually separated something that's a little different that you see, because a lot of people, when they talk about purpose, they roll in passion with it. And I actually separate it intentionally. Because there's a such thing as positive passion and negative passion. And that's something that actually has to be really sorted out separately from just finding your purpose. Because your purpose is the actual element itself of what you're doing. Passion is the energy that drives it. That's the difference between the two. And a lot of people try to equate them together. And I intentionally wanted to separate those out because there are examples of people that have negative passion. They can be so passionate about it that they're actually counterproductive to everything that they're trying to do. Because of the way they handle things. It's negative energy, micromanaging people and doing those types of things that creates a toxic environment and actually is counterproductive to what they're trying to do. So I want people to be able to read that and be able to distinguish and stop and think about that aspect when they're going through and looking at trying to build their framework for success.
Almost like combining sports like powerlifting and running. You just can't combine those things. You need to separate those. Those are 2 different activities. Don't do that.
Yeah.
So what's the timeline for this project you're working
on? My original timeline was I was wanting to be done with it already. I'm about halfway through the book at the moment. My goal is to have it done by the middle, possibly end of March. So I've got to get through. We've got powerlifting is eats up a lot of my time at the moment. Plus, I've had a lot of speaking engagements that I'm getting scheduled for, and doing things like trying to get the word out and share with people and people like yourself that invited me on to be able to that have heard the things that I've talked about and have invited me to come out and be able to share and continue to pour into people. And that's what I want people to take away from this, is that this is not about me making a big name for myself. This is about making everything that I have had to go through and endure and learn, and being able to package that in a way that it helps somebody else. I want people to be able to benefit from it. I want it to be able to change and impact somebody, that if I can keep somebody from having to learn the lesson the hard way that I had to learn, then it has served its purpose. Because there's two ways to learn lessons in life. There's the hard way, which is don't listen to anybody and go ahead and go through it yourself and deal with the consequences that come with it. Or the easy way, which is listen to somebody that's already had to endure it and listen to what they've had to say, listen to what they did to be able to either get past it, overcome it, or not have to endure it at all. And to me, that would be the better framework. But there are people out there that insist on learning things the hard way no matter what. So
leverage your community. Going back to your point, talking about your grandfather being reclusive and pulling back from everyone and doing it himself. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's a model that we can look at too, is there's strength in having people around you, family, people who can coach you, right? People who are there to support you and you can learn from. I think that's your superpower, when you can leverage your community to help you grow and help you improve.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's amazing. Mm-hmm. So we will definitely keep you in our hearts and minds as you finish up the book. And once the book is done, I would love to have you come back and let's celebrate that as well. That'd be great to see book number 2 out there in the world. So keep me in mind. I would love to have you back to talk about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to come back.
So for parents, as we close off, can you give us a tip for demonstrating unconditional love? What can we do this week, practically, something that we can put into place, no matter where our kids are at, no matter how old they are? What can we do this week as a parent to demonstrate that unconditional love?
The thing that I would tell people that they need to start off with, they need to look and see what the barriers are between them and their children. What are the barriers? What are the barriers to communication? What are the barriers to, actual, physical touch, where you're healthy physical touch, where your children are concerned? When's the last time that you gave your parents a hug? When's the last time you actually gave your children a hug? And it's amazing, especially as they become teenagers, they become so independent that seems to just, dissipate. And, as they get ready to leave the house, and it's not that way for everybody, but I have seen households that it's like that. The children don't hug the parents anymore. They don't tell them bye when they leave the house. They just walk out. Start identifying those little barriers right there and start initiating that contact again. Making sure that, your children know every day, that tell them that you love them. Make sure they know. Don't just assume, don't make assumptions. Make it vocal, make it known. And I would say that would be the first thing to really start looking at is, what are you doing from day to day to make sure that your loved ones know that you love them?
It's amazing. Thank you for being so real and vulnerable with us. I really love our conversation today. I can just imagine you as a guest speaker at an event. You would just bring so much wisdom and care to what you prepare. If somebody's looking for a great speaker for their event, someone's wants somebody to lift something heavy at their house as a powerlifting coach, if there's somebody out there that's that's just looking for more about unconditional love and they want to pick up the book, how do we connect with you? I really would love to make sure we feature that as well.
So the easiest way would be go to my website. And I actually have I met with somebody this morning that's helping me kind of revamp and redo my website to make it better. But it's still functional. And so it's just going to change a little bit over the next couple months. But it's drdavismcallister.com. And you can go on there. There's links on there to reach out to me that will get to me by email. You can also become part of my email list. I'm going to start sending out newsletters and little blurbs through the website here pretty soon. There's also links on there for my book if you want to just click on there, or you can just go to Amazon. All my books are on Amazon. Just if you will type in my name and Pillars of Powerful Parenting, the book and the study guide should show up for you. And you can order those straight off Amazon. And then there's contact information on there as well. If somebody's interested in having me come and speak at their organization or event, I'll do anything from, an hour presentation up to, doing a full day conference for somebody. That's the one thing that I'm hoping to be able to develop is have it where, maybe a church or an organization or something like that has me come in and I take an entire group of people through the study guide and the book together all in one, all in a day's conference session. So I'm hoping to get one of those scheduled here pretty soon.
So great to have you on the podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your day to, break away from the family to join me today. I really do appreciate the fact that you've come and we've had this conversation. And again, I'm looking forward to book number 2 and can't wait to continue our conversation together. So thanks for making time today.
No, thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for subscribing and following. And you're listening this far in the podcast, so you are my best friend. I'm sorry, but you are now my best friend. So welcome. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. LivingTheNextChapter.com has a link on the website to our Facebook group. Are you on Facebook? Probably. You can go there and you can actually interact with our guests. You can talk to them. You can hear more about their journey, about their books. You can speak to them directly. You don't need me. You can come right over to LivingTheNextChapter.com, click on our Facebook link to our community. You can talk to other listeners of the podcast from around the world who are on Facebook. And, again, speak with our guests. Don't you want to speak to the guests you just heard from? Yeah, you can do that on Living the Next Chapter. Go over there. There's links to our Facebook group, and you're welcome to join. Thanks for listening.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.